There's a chair in Walter Hicks's dining room that no one has sat in for 6 years. It's pushed in tight against the table, same as the others. Same dark oak, same worn armrests. But if you looked closely, you'd notice something the rest of the room doesn't have. A thin layer of dust along the top rail, undisturbed, because nobody ever reaches for it. Nobody ever pulls it out. Walter eats alone most nights now. Just him, the hum of the refrigerator, and that empty chair sitting across from him like a question he stopped trying to answer. This is a story about that chair, about the daughter who used to sit in it, and about the kind of silence that can last so long you start to mistake it for peace. Emma Hicks was 26 years old the last time she sat at her father's table. She remembers the smell of the pot roast, the way the porch light flickered because Walter never got around to fixing it, and the exact moment the evening broke apart, right after she said the words, "Dad, I'm marrying him, with or without you." Walter didn't yell. That was the strange part. He just set his fork down, slow and deliberate, like a man setting down something heavy he'd carried a long way. "Then I guess you already made your choice," he said. "That's not fair." "No," he agreed quietly, "it isn't." She waited for him to say something else, anything else, an apology, a question, even more anger, something she could push against. Instead, he stood, carried his plate to the sink, and watched it in silence while his daughter watched his back, waiting for a man who would not turn around. She left that night and didn't come back. Here is what you should understand about Walter Hicks. He was not a cruel man. He was a man who had buried a wife 9 years earlier, raised a daughter alone in a house that still smelled like her mother's perfume in certain corners, and built his entire understanding of love around one single rule: protect her, even from herself. The man Emma wanted to marry, Daniel, was 12 years older than her, freshly divorced, and worked construction jobs that moved him from state to state. To Walter, that wasn't a future. That was a warning sign wearing a wedding ring. He never said it cruelly. He said it the way fathers say the things they're most afraid of, badly, and at the worst possible time, dressed up as concern so it wouldn't sound like fear. "I just don't want you to end up disappointed," he told her once. "You mean like you were disappointed in me?" she'd snap back. He hadn't meant that at all, but by the time he understood what she'd heard, the door was already closing. 6 years is a long time to let a silence grow teeth. In that time, Emma built a life 2 states away. She married Daniel in a small ceremony with folding chairs and string lights, and her father's seat, reserved just in case, stayed empty the entire evening. She sent one photo from that day to his old email address. He never replied. She told herself she wasn't waiting for a reply. She checked her phone every night for a year anyway. Walter, for his part, kept the house the same, kept her room untouched, kept setting 2 plates out of habit some nights before catching himself and putting one back. Pride is a strange architecture. It's built one small brick at a time. One missed call, one swallowed apology, one more day telling yourself tomorrow, until eventually you're standing behind a wall so tall you've forgotten you're the one who built it. Both of them, in their own kitchens, in their own separate cities, told themselves the same lie. She'll reach out first. He'll reach out first. And every day that passed made the sentence a little more true and a little more impossible to say out loud. There were smaller moments too, ones neither of them ever spoke about. Walter, standing in the greeting card aisle every February for her birthday, picking up a card, reading it twice, and putting it back on the shelf because he didn't trust himself to sign it without saying too much or too little. Emma, driving past the exit for her hometown on her way to visit a friend, slowing down without meaning to, then speeding back up before the exit ramp could talk her into something she wasn't ready for. Once, at a wedding for one of his old coworkers, Walter overheard a father giving a speech to his own daughter, something about how proud he was, how he'd walk her down any aisle in the world. Walter had excused himself to the parking lot before the man even finished, sitting alone in his truck for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel like it owed him an explanation. And once, in a different city, Emma sat in her car outside a hospital where a coworker's father had just been admitted, watching families walk in together, watching daughters hold their arms. Father's arms through the sliding doors, and she cried until her mascara ran, furious at herself for missing a man she was still too proud to call. Grief doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just sits quietly in the passenger seat, riding along on ordinary days, waiting for you to notice it's there. The call came on a Tuesday in October. Walter was 61 now, retired from the plant, spending his mornings on a porch that had finally gotten its light fixed. 3 years too late for anyone to notice but him. The number on the screen wasn't one he recognized. Ohio area code. Mr. Hicks, a woman's voice, careful, professional. My name is Renee. I'm a nurse at St. Vincent's Hospital. I'm calling about your daughter, Emma. Walter's hand found the edge of the porch railing before his mind had caught up to why he needed to hold on to something. She's stable, Renee said quickly, hearing the silence for what it was. Car accident. She's going to be all right, but she's been asking for you. Walter didn't remember getting his keys. He didn't remember the 4-hour drive or stopping for gas or any single mile marker on the interstate. What he remembered, what he would remember for the rest of his life, was the moment he walked into that hospital room and saw his daughter's face, pale and bruised along one cheekbone, and the way her eyes filled with tears the instant she saw him standing in the doorway. Dad? Just one word, but it carried 6 years inside it. I'm here, Walter said, and his voice broke on the second word, 61 years old and sounding like a boy. I'm here, sweetheart. She wasn't badly hurt. A broken wrist, a concussion, bruised ribs from where the seatbelt had saved her life. But she was scared and tired, and something about lying in a hospital bed strips away 6 years of pride faster than any conversation ever could. Walter pulled a chair beside her bed, an ordinary plastic hospital chair, nothing like the one at home, but he sat in it like it was the most important seat in the world. I got your photo, he said finally, staring at his hands, from the wedding. I looked at it every day for probably a year. You never wrote back. I didn't know how. He shook his head slowly. Every time I tried, it felt like the words weren't big enough, like an apology that small couldn't possibly cover 6 years. Emma's eyes were wet, but she managed the small, tired laugh. You could have just said sorry, Dad. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be honest. Walter looked at her, really looked, the way he hadn't let himself in years, because looking meant remembering, and remembering meant feeling the whole weight of what he'd lost. I was wrong about Daniel. I was wrong about a lot of things. I told myself I was protecting you, but the truth is, I was scared of losing you to somebody else's life, and instead, I lost you to my own stubbornness. That's a harder thing to live with. I said things I didn't mean to, Emma whispered. I said with or without you like it was some kind of ultimatum. I was scared you'd actually choose without. I would never, Walter's caught. Emma, I would never choose without you. Not one single day of these 6 years did I choose without you. I just didn't know how to choose with you anymore. I forgot how. The machines beeped steadily in the quiet room. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rattled past, and in that small fluorescent lit space, 2 people who loved each other more than either had admitted in years finally stopped performing their hurt and simply let it be seen. Daniel arrived an hour later, rushing in from the job site still in his work boots, and stopped cold in the doorway when he saw Walter sitting beside his wife's bed. For a long moment, neither man said anything. Then Walter stood, extended his hand,
The same hand that once refused to shake Daniel's at a Christmas dinner 5 years ago and said simply, "Thank you for taking care of her. I should have said that a long time ago." Daniel looked at the hand, then at Emma's face, searching for permission he didn't need. He shook it. "She talks about you more than you'd think," Daniel said quietly, even when she was angry, especially then, honestly. Walter's jaw tightened, holding back something too large for a hospital hallway. "I'd like to know my daughter's husband," he said, "if that's still something you'd want." "It's something we both want," Emma said from the bed, her voice thick. "It's something I've wanted for 6 years.
Recovery took 3 weeks. Walter stayed the entire time, sleeping in a cramped, extended-stay motel near the hospital, showing up every morning with coffee and the kind of small talk that slowly, carefully began rebuilding a bridge, one plank at a time. They didn't fix 6 years in 3 weeks. Grief and pride don't work that fast, and any story that tells you otherwise is lying to make you feel better. There were still awkward pauses, still moments where old resentment flickered up like static before either of them caught it and let it go. Healing isn't a straight line. It's a conversation you have to keep choosing to have, again and again, even on the days it would be easier not to. But every morning, Walter showed up, and every morning that mattered more than the words either of them found to say. One evening, about a week in, Emma finally asked the question that had been sitting between them since the hospital doorway. "Why didn't you ever call, Dad? In 6 years, not once. I know it wasn't because you didn't love me." Walter was quiet for a long moment, turning a paper cup slowly between his hands. "Because every day that passed made it feel like it had to be a bigger conversation than the last," he said finally. "First it was, I should apologize. Then it became, I should apologize for waiting so long to apologize. And after a while, the whole thing felt like a mountain I didn't know how to climb anymore. So I just stopped looking at it. Told myself I'd get to it. Same way a man tells himself he'll fix the porch light eventually." "Did you fix the porch light?" A small, surprised laugh escaped him. 3 years ago, actually." "Did you... Why then?" Walter looked at her, and for the first time in the whole conversation, his eyes were steady. "Because I got tired of coming home in the dark." Emma didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She just reached over and squeezed his hand, and for a moment, the beeping monitors and the antiseptic smell of the room disappeared, and it was just a father and daughter, finally speaking the same language again after years of silence. There was one more conversation that mattered. On the last night before her discharge, Emma asked him carefully about her mother, about the year after the funeral, about why he'd never remarried, why he'd never even really dated. "Your mother used to say something to me," Walter said, staring out the dark hospital window. She said, "The measure of a man isn't how he acts when things are easy. It's whether he stays in the room when things get hard." I think somewhere along the way, I forgot that applied to you too, not just to her. I stayed in the room when she was sick. I should have stayed in the room with you instead of walking out of it over a fight about a man I barely gave a chance. "You're staying now," Emma said softly. "I'm staying now. For good, if you'll have me." On the day Emma was discharged, Walter drove them both back to her house, carried her bag inside, and stood a little awkwardly in her kitchen, unsure of his place in a home he'd never been invited into. "Stay for dinner," Emma said. Not a question, an invitation with the weight of 6 years behind it. Daniel set an extra plate at the table, an ordinary plate, on an ordinary table in an ordinary kitchen that never once in 5 years of marriage held a chair for Emma's father. Walter sat down slowly, the way you sit somewhere you've imagined 1,000 times but never believed you'd really reach. "You know," he said, looking around the small kitchen, "your mother would have loved this house." Emma's eyes softened. "You never talk about her." "I know. I think I was scared that if I talked about losing her, I'd have to admit how scared I was of losing you too. So I just held on too tight, and it pushed you away instead. Emma reached across the table and set her hand over his, the cast on her wrist pale against his sun-worn skin. You don't have to hold on too tight anymore, Dad. I'm not going anywhere. I just needed you to let go of being right and start being here instead. Walter drives back to Ohio now every few weeks. Emma and Daniel come to him for Thanksgiving. Last November, when Emma walked into her father's dining room, she stopped in the doorway and stared at the table. The chair that had sat empty for 6 years, dusty and undisturbed, had been pulled out. A place had been set. Her mother's old china, brought down from the cabinet for the first time since the funeral.
I didn't know if you'd want your old seat back, Walter said, standing a little nervously by the stove. But I figured I'd set it, just in case. I've had it saved a long time. Emma didn't say anything at first. She just walked over, pulled out the chair the rest of the way, and sat down. It's exactly where I left it, she said softly. So was I, Walter answered. I just needed someone to remind me a door only stays closed if you're the one holding it shut. There's a chair in Walter Hicks's dining room today, and it isn't empty anymore. It gets pulled out every Thanksgiving, every Sunday call that turns into a Sunday visit, every ordinary Tuesday when Emma just wants to hear her father's voice. The dust is gone. The silence is gone. What's left is something neither of them takes for granted anymore. The simple, stubborn, unglamorous work of choosing each other. Again, every single day it would be easier not to. Because love, real love, the kind that survives 6 years of silence and a hospital hallway and 2 people too proud to dial a phone number, that love was never about being right. It was only ever about staying at the table. And somewhere out there tonight, there's probably a chair in your own life that's been empty a little too long. Maybe it's a parent, a sibling, a friend you loved once and let pride talk you out of calling. The door isn't as closed as you think. Sometimes, all it takes to open it again is one honest sentence, spoken by someone brave enough to go first.